Kimberly Evans, a world-famous model, thought she was stepping into another thrilling adventure, capturing stunning photos near the coast of Vancouver Island. But within moments, her glamorous photo shoot would turn into a battle for survival against one of nature's deadliest predators. Hit like and subscribe. This is Fierce. Kimberly Evans lived a life most people could only dream of. As a successful and glamorous model, she had risen to fame for her striking looks and her ability to take on any challenge that came her way. Whether it was a high-fashion runway in Paris or an adventurous photo shoot in the wild, Kimberly was always ready for the next big thing. On May 7, 2024, she had planned a unique photo shoot off the coast of Vancouver Island, Canada. The setting was breathtaking, a remote area where the vast, open ocean met towering cliffs, a location as wild and untamed as it was beautiful. This photo shoot was special because it wasn't just about fashion. Kimberly was going to pose on a yacht with orcas swimming in the background. These majestic sea creatures, known for their intelligence and grace, were expected to add a dramatic backdrop to Kimberly's stunning poses. But the day that was supposed to cement her reputation as a fearless adventurer would soon turn into her worst nightmare. The day started like any other glamorous shoot. The sun was shining and the weather was perfect for what everyone hoped would be an unforgettable session. Kimberly arrived at the dock where the crew had prepared a sleek white yacht to take them to a remote spot in the ocean. The photographers were excited too. They knew this could be their best work yet. Orcas, often called killer whales, were known for their beauty and intelligence. Capturing these magnificent animals in the same frame as a world-class model would make for the kind of shot that would be talked about for years. The crew set off toward the shoot location, and the boat cut smoothly through the clear blue waters. The excitement was palpable, and Kimberly, who loved the thrill of the ocean, was looking forward to seeing the orcas up close. She had posed in dangerous places before, on cliffs, in fast-moving rivers, but this time, the danger wasn't part of the plan. As the yacht reached its destination, everything seemed to be going according to plan. The water was calm and the sky was clear. The crew set up their equipment, and Kimberly began posing on the edge of the boat. Suddenly, someone spotted a dark fin cutting through the water in the distance. It was an orca. The crew members exchanged excited glances. This was exactly what they had been waiting for. The photographers began snapping pictures, capturing the moment as the orca approached the boat, its massive body gliding effortlessly through the water. But then something unexpected happened. More fins appeared. 3, 4, 5 orcas now circled the yacht. At first, the crew was thrilled. But soon, their excitement turned to unease. The orcas were circling the boat, their movements faster and more aggressive than anyone had anticipated. Kimberly, still posing, was unaware of the growing danger beneath her. The tension in the air was palpable, but before anyone could react, one of the orcas made a sudden move. It lunged at the side of the boat with incredible force, causing it to rock violently. The impact threw Kimberly off balance, and in an instant, she lost her footing and fell into the water. The crew screamed as they saw her hit the cold ocean, her white gown billowing out around her like a parachute. The water, once peaceful, had become a terrifying place. Kimberly struggled to stay afloat as her heavy gown dragged her down. The crew rushed to grab life preservers, but the orcas were closing in fast. Kimberly kicked her legs frantically, trying to swim back toward the boat, but the gown weighed her down, making it nearly impossible to move. She gasped for air, her heart racing as the orcas circled closer. The first orca made its move, attacking from below. Kimberly felt a powerful force slam into her legs, and before she could scream, the orca's jaws clamped down, dragging her underwater. The pain was immediate and intense. The orca's teeth sliced through her leg like a knife through butter. Kimberly thrashed wildly, trying to break free, but it was no use. The orca pulled her deeper, its grip unrelenting. The water around her turned dark with blood, and her vision began to blur as the world above her faded away. Back on the boat, the crew watched in horror, helpless to save her. They saw the water churn as the orcas attacked, but there was nothing they could do. As Kimberly's strength faded, another orca joined the attack. It rammed into her with incredible force, driving her deeper into the abyss. The orcas worked together, tearing at her body with their powerful jaws. Each time she tried to surface, they dragged her back down, their powerful bodies tossing her around like a rag doll. Kimberly's fight for survival was coming to an end. The crew on the yacht was in a state of shock. They had seen everything unfold but were powerless to stop it. One of the crew members grabbed a rope and threw it into the water, hoping Kimberly could grab hold of it, but it was too late. She was too far gone, pulled deep into the ocean by the orca's relentless assault. The captain radioed for help, his voice shaking as he described the horrific scene. But they were miles away from the nearest coast, and there was little chance that help would arrive in time. The crew could only watch in disbelief as the water calmed once again, the orcas disappearing into the deep, taking Kimberly with them. When the Coast Guard finally arrived hours later, there was no trace of Kimberly. The ocean, once so peaceful, had swallowed her whole. News of the attack spread quickly, making headlines around the world. People were horrified by the story of the model who had been taken by orcas during what should have been a simple photo shoot. Experts debated why the orcas had attacked so violently, but no one could give a definitive answer. Kimberly Evans' tragic death became a warning to others who sought adventure in the wild. The ocean, while beautiful, was also unpredictable and dangerous. Even the most experienced adventurers were not immune to its dangers. For those who knew Kimberly, the loss was devastating. She had been full of life, always seeking new experiences and living on the edge. But in the end, it was her thirst for adventure that led her to the one place she could not escape from. Kimberly's story became a reminder to respect the power of nature. No amount of beauty or fame could protect someone from the raw force of the ocean. The orcas, often seen as symbols of grace and intelligence, had shown a darker side that day. A reminder that, in the wild, humans are never truly in control. As the sun set on that tragic day, the waters of Vancouver Island returned to their calm, serene state. But for those who had witnessed the attack, the ocean would never look the same again. It had claimed a life, leaving behind only memories of a woman who had once lived so boldly, yet met her end in the most violent and unexpected way.
Tilikum was an orca. He was made famous by the documentary Blackfish, which details the life of captive orcas. It's an incredibly sad and moving insight into the terrible conditions these magnificent animals are subjected to. Tilikum was just 2 years old when he was ripped away from his family in the wild. He was separated from his mother and towed behind a boat towards Canadian shores to begin a life in captivity. Once he arrived at Canada's coastline, he was transferred into a tank at Sealand, Victoria, British Columbia. It was there, in a tiny pool, where he was made to perform mindless tricks in front of a fascinated crowd, day in and day out. Orcas are thought to be one of the most intelligent animals on Earth. They have highly complex social interactions with other individuals, both within their pod and from outside it. Typically, wild orcas spend their entire lives with their mothers, and pods can be made up of 4 generations. They form friendships and lifelong bonds with each other. They help other individuals when they're sick or injured, and they can display a range of emotions. Being held in captivity is one of the harshest forms of animal cruelty when it comes to orcas. Tilikum had no variation in his daily routine at Sealand. There was little or no mental stimulation for him. Not only that, but he was also placed in a pool with 2 older, dominant females who would bully him. They raked him with their teeth, causing him to bleed. They bashed into him to assert their dominance, and inside such a small pool, There was nowhere for Tilikum to go. It was the start of a life of misery for the young killer whale. Kelty Byrne was a marine biology student who was enthusiastic and eager to learn. During her spare time, she worked at Canada's Sealand. It was a way for her to earn extra money to help fund her studies and was an environment in which she could put her learning into practice. Working with Tilikum and the other orcas at Sealand was a rewarding and physically demanding job. Working as an animal trainer, Kelty knew the importance of building a rapport with the animals she worked with. Being assigned to train the orcas was an exciting opportunity, but she had no idea that her part-time job would one day cost her her life. That tragic day was February 20th, 1991. The enthusiastic 20-year-old had just finished a successful show with Tilikum and the two females. The packed audience had lapped it up, marveling at the speed, agility, and power of the orcas as they performed in the pool in front of them. When the audience started to file out of the area at the end of the show, Kelty began tidying up. She walked around the edge of the water, scooping out the various toys and floating objects from the surface of the pool with a net. But suddenly, she slipped and fell into the water. She was a strong swimmer and went to pull herself out onto the side when she felt a sharp tug on her foot. She looked down and noticed that Tilikum had hold of her foot in his mouth. Kelty let out a panicked cry as the killer whale pulled her backwards and dragged her underwater. The three whales had never had anyone in their pool before. It wasn't part of their routine. The only toys they had been allowed to play with were small plastic ones that they were commanded to push around the water to entertain the crowd. This was a new experience for them. It turned out to be a deadly experience. Beneath the surface, Kelty fought for air, but Tilikum pulled her to the bottom of the pool and refused to let go. He tugged her along effortlessly. She was tiny in comparison to his huge frame. He could have ripped her to shreds then and there, but instead he wanted to have some fun. Kelty's lungs felt like they were going to burst. She could see the surface of the pool above her. It was so far away she didn't know if she could hold on much longer. But then, momentarily, Tilikum released his grip on the young student and she swam to the surface. Gasping for air, she made a mad dash for the side of the pool. But the three orcas weren't finished with her yet. They were excited by this new plaything in the water. They had never had anything in the pool before that was so interactive. They were fixated on Kelty as they pushed her around and bumped into her over and over. They bit down on her, causing her to cry out in pain. When Kelty was just feet from the safety of dry land, they grabbed her once more and pulled her backwards. Horrified onlookers heard her cry out, "I don't want to die," as she was dragged underwater again. Staff rushed to the pool. There wasn't a specific safety protocol for this kind of event. It had never happened before, and trainers weren't allowed in the water with the whales at that time. They threw fish into the water in an attempt to get them to release Kelty. They hit a bucket on the side of the pool and slapped the surface of the water to try to distract the orcas, but it didn't work. They shouted their recall commands, but none of them responded. Fellow trainer Karen McGee threw a life ring toward Kelty as she resurfaced once again. Kelty made a desperate grab for it, but the orcas kept her away. The youngster screamed out Karen's name, begging her to help, but Tilikum and the two females, Nootka and Haida, kept her from grabbing hold of the floating buoy. They knew what they were doing. They knew she was in distress, and still they kept dragging her underwater and pulling her around their pool like a plaything. She was at their mercy. With the orcas weighing in excess of 6 tons, the young competitive swimmer was no match for them as they tugged at her again and again. When Kelty resurfaced a third time, she no longer moved. To the shock of her colleagues, it was clear that she was dead, drowned by 3 captive orcas. She had been stripped of her clothes and floated on the surface, covered in bites and bruises. She was the first person to be killed by a captive killer whale in history. It sent shockwaves across the world. It took 2 more hours before staff at Sealand could retrieve Kelty's body from the water. It was incredibly traumatic for staff and emergency responders to watch the orcas drag the body of their deceased colleague around the pool. But the orcas played tirelessly with her, until eventually they released her and allowed staff to scoop her out with a huge net. She had drowned just feet from the edge of the pool and in front of her friends and colleagues who were powerless to help. It had been a terrible mistake, but it had been one that could have been avoided. Paul Spong, director of Orca Lab who researches orcas, said that the incident was waiting to happen. If you pen a wild killer whale and deprive them of almost all mental and sensory stimulation, they are going to become psychologically damaged. The same can be said for humans treated in a similar way. Nobody could blame the whales for Kelty's tragic death. The incident had been years in the making, following a decade of mistreatment. Only a year later, Sealand closed down. It never recovered from the terrible death of Kelty, and serious questions were raised about the ethics of keeping orcas in captivity. Tilikum, Nootka, and Haida were rehomed. Tilikum was transferred to Orlando SeaWorld, where his captive conditions were significantly improved. But it was too late. The psychological damage had already been done to the now fully grown orca, and in time, he would strike again and again.